Ave Satanis, welcome. You're watching Sanctuary Satanica. I'm the daughter of Lilith, and in this video, I'm going to share a bit about the start of my Qliphothic journey, my exploration / work in the qlipha called Lilith, also called Nahemoth. I call it Nahemoth just to alleviate confusion because the Qliphoth that Lilith rules over is actually called Gamaliel. The Qlipha, that Lilith rules over is actually called Gamaliel. So I just find it confusing for anyone who may not know about the Qliphoth, like to follow if I'm calling this one Lilith. So I'm calling it Nahemoth to correspond to its ruler, Nama, or sometimes called Nahima, I believe. But we'll call her Nama. Yes, so before I get into that, you may have noticed this flag. This flag was actually my altar cloth for a very long time, and you can't see in this light, but it's stained with all kinds of things. And it hangs like this, the flag, which looks odd in the mirrored video. It looks less odd in person, but anyway. And it's up here because I have hand painted a particular altar cloth that I'm using for this Qliphothic work because I decided, I should have mentioned, I am using, what I'm doing is based off of, at least, it's based off of Osnath Mason's Qliphothic meditations. I'm altering it a little bit because that's just what I do. I'm not a draconian magician. I don't fully know that much about that tradition. As far as I know, it's like connected to Luciferianism, but it's its own thing. So I'm kind of taking what's there and I'm making it like suit my practice before I just jump in. But I should give credit to who I'm taking it from. You know what I mean? Anyway, so I've been doing the steps that she has laid out, which would include an opening ritual, or an opening for every time you do a ritual related to the book, and then the invocation, the path working, the dream work, and then there is a portion where you do your own personalized ritual at the very end of that work with that qlipha before you move on to the next. I will not be sharing what I choose to do for a personal ritual. However, I do extend upon the path working. I don't just do the path working she lays out in her book. I also, I'm someone, I like to take time to explore the realms I'm in and let the spirits that I'm allowing to guide me, to lead me to do certain work in there, because I feel like there's always more to find. So yes, I did that path working, and I'm doing an additional path working, or I have done an additional path working, and that's what I will be sharing, because it would be very boring for me to share the path working that's just in someone else's book. That would just be plagiarizing her book, which we don't need to be doing, like in the format of a video. I mean, it would just be me basically reading her book to you. And like, you can just go read her book if you want to do that. So I'm going to instead share what would be unique to me. Again, not everything, not the personalized ritual, not everything that I discovered there, not everything that it means, but I just thought it'd be interesting, similar to my Demon Diaries, which I need to catch up on, but because there have been entities that I could record in there, but that's kind of be similar to this. There may be some qlipha I choose not to share about, certain qlipha I choose not to share about. I just don't know what I don't know about this work. Yes, I've done research before I jumped in, and this qlipha wasn't particularly difficult. It was a bit intimidating, but it wasn't particularly difficult to work through. But as I move forward, and as like Gamaliel is kind of calling me, and I'm realizing exactly where, um, in terms of like, geographically is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like where each qlipha is, when I'm actually like understanding that and understanding the skills as a magician that I would need to pass through these tunnels. And now I understand why they're described as tunnels, because you know, like absolutely they are. Um, these tunnels that kind of very, you know, they very much twist and turn and can get confusing. But also you need certain skills as a magician to allow your consciousness to even travel through them. So it's, you know, are some parts of it going to be fairly easy for me? I predict so, but I think as I get further along, it's going to be more challenging, and that is the point. So I'm not used to being challenged. I'm used to things being pretty easy for me in terms of skill and whatnot. I'm someone that like I can pick something up brand new and be either very good at it or very bad at it. And if I'm very good at it, I keep doing it. If I'm very bad at it, I usually don't do it unless I really want to learn how, or need to. Like, I can be a quick learner. I'm typically a quick learner, you know, and I get pretty proficient at things quickly. But I feel like this is going to be more personal and more challenging because this is Lilith scandals kind of dancing. This is the shadow realm we're talking about. You know, this is the shadow. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the actual experience, because it's a little weird, you know. It's being in any part of what could be considered the spirit realm or just the universal mind is weird. And I seem to have filled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically 6. I haven't written down what happened in the dream working. This is Asnath Mason's sigil for that qlipha. My drawing of it, which is absolute shite, but luckily I wasn't relying on this drawing. I have a nicer, I'll just show you because I'm done with this and I'm going to remove it anyway. I'm going to cleanse this mirror again anyway. But, you know, much better. And I did adapt the flames a little bit to make it simple, but, you know, that's what I do. The sigil, the idea is there. And recently I was kind of like closing up some work with it, and because I know Lilith kind of told me I'm going to need at least that sigil in my mind to properly transition to Gamaliel. At least as like it'll form into like a gateway, and then it'll be like the tunnels and then a new gateway. Like is kind of how she described it. So and you don't have to use that sigil, of course, but with the system I'm using, I might as well be consistent. So you know, in my mind it's very clear. I've actually noticed my visualization skills improve. Sorry, we're reading now. Stop rambling, Angela. Fucking read the thing. Also, I wrote this in a hurry before bed, before I was like going to start the dream work. So if I read it word for word, it may sound very clunky and confusing. One thing I want to note is like when I wrote down Nahemoth, aka Lilith, and then comma the Black Earth, I forgot actually that this qlipha is called the Black Earth until after I had pretty much done this, which was interesting because one of the first things I remember when doing Asnath Mason's path working is when I actually like stepped into it. The first thing I saw was how dark the soil was beneath my feet. It was like very dark, and I got the sense that it had soaked up a lot of like blood and flesh and things like that. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting that I forgot about that until then. Okay, so I think I've talked about this before in my live stream thing. I talked about the shadow resurfacing and presenting some things to me that like I had absolutely no idea what were going on in the back of my head. And that was weird, and I'm not going to share those things publicly, at least not without a paywall, because they're a little messed up. If we want to like just drag them out into this reality, it would be messed up. But the subconscious mind is messed up, so you know, you know what I mean. And I know how to process that, and don't worry, okay. Anyway, I stepped through the cave of Lilith's womb and into the realm of Nahemoth. The soil was dark as ash and cinder, but fertile with blood and bones. As flesh dissolved into the black earth, these essences are stored. I invoked Nama, the ruler of the first Qliphoth. I expected her to provoke my sexuality, which of course she showed me she was perfectly capable of doing. Yet she had other plans for what I needed to focus on. It was more like in the dreams and things did the sexual stuff come up, but it wasn't, again, like, it was like I was expecting that a lot, and as we'll read on later, Lilith popped in to kind of like clarify what that's about. But it's difficult to remember the start of all of what I saw and experienced. I know Mother Lilith came to assure me that she was ready for me in Gamaliel once I completed this work. She let me know that through tarot, because I pulled it out for a second, what to expect. It was interesting because she had pulled some cards, or I had pulled some cards for her, rather. I wish I should have written them down, because like instantly when I went back, back into it, I'm very good at doing that. Don't worry. It takes me like a second, but it was like I could then see those events described in the cards happening. So that was cool. That was cool. She was just kind of giving me a heads up. Then she said am I in the right place? Yeah. Then she said it's true. Oh, it's time. I can't read my own handwriting. It's time to go with Nama now. So, with Nama, I began walking until I felt compelled to reach into a spot in the earth, like this soil that became very like sticky, and when I would dig into it, it would push back against me almost. It would like push me away or pull me in a different direction. Kind of like slime, like it was no longer soil, it was like almost like conscious mud. Very weird. Or tar. Maybe tar is a better tar is a better description. Yeah, it was like tar, but with like a somewhat of a response to me, not just sinking. And I didn't know what to expect, like what to expect to pull out, but for some reason I felt like I had to dig through this, because it was something that I needed or wanted to see. And I won't get into it too much, but like, I found a representation of a person no longer in my life for good reason. Basically allowed myself to destroy that representation. I had a conversation with Nama about that, about like the lessons I learned from that, let's call it, relationship, and my part in that. More on that. So let me see if I can read about that, because I don't want to get too much into the backstory. Yeah, it was through the concept of love we were talking about, and she had asked me, Nama had asked me, like, why did you Why did you engage with this? You knew deep down it wasn't real. Like, you knew it deep down in your core. You allowed yourself to believe it was real, but you knew it wasn't. And I kind of responded with like my inner child's excuse, and basically said like, well, I don't, you know, because of my parents, like, I don't really know what to compare like healthy love to, and blah blah fucking blah. And she called me out on that immediately. She was like, was Lilith not just here? Like, was Lilith not just here? Bitch, daughter of Lilith, was she not just here showing you how much she loves you? Because like, I didn't go in depth in my notes about that, but you know, when mama's there, she's there. And likewise, she's like, are you, Nama said, you know, you have known Satan. Like, you have known Satan before you dealt with this person. So there is no excuse to not know what love is. You just didn't believe you deserve better, and you allowed yourself to stay in a place where you didn't deserve better, and you accepted worse. So a little bit of a call out, but that's just what that is. And it's, I know it sounds like a very basic shadow work thing. That's because I'm kind of skimping on some of the more violent things I learned, you know, like, because they are very animalistic in how they were delivered to me, those messages, and I have to like interpret them. I'm still interpreting them, and I don't want to like put out messages irresponsibly. So anyway, because I get some strange DMs on the Instagram, okay? um so yeah, I let my, after this conversation, I let my hands open, and like the representation of that person was like just dust that fell to the soil. And then Nama kind of smiled at me approvingly, and she said I should celebrate this release. And that was, now I remember the Three of Cups was something Lilith had pulled, so it was corresponding there. Then, okay, so this is where shit gets weird. This is where shit gets really weird, because I may have wandered off. I suddenly like felt this like pain right here. Very weird. No real reason for it. Never felt like such a something, like just very pinpointed right here. Nowhere else. Nowhere surrounding it. Wasn't like just there. And like using this, it looked like black blood was spilling out of my neck and pouring over my body and into the soil, and it formed this reflective pool over the soil. And I kind of like stared into it, and either scried into it or like physically dove into it. I don't really know. It felt like I just dove into it. And I was in the void for a while, and I just did some void stuff for a while. But then I became aware of this again, and this time in the void, it was not black, you know, blood. It was light, like liquid light. Weird. And then it formed like the 11-pointed star, stopped, you know, leaking out of me, whatever. And so that star appeared kind of like below me, as if it's a floor in the void, and then it would rotate widdershins and like down. It gave like the impression that he was like almost drilling down into the underworld. And then the descent like came to a halt at a point, and this light shone from above, almost like a spotlight, into the center of the star. And there's like this object that started to look like a person underneath like a cloth, like a gray cloth, descending down slowly. And I went up and I like caught it. And I think the cloth fell off at one point, and it was like a tiny version of me. It like, and it would change. It was like sometimes a me when I was younger. Sometimes, well, it was always like a younger version of me, but it was like sometimes it was me when I was like under the age of 10. Sometimes it was me when I was a baby. Sometimes it was me when I was a teenager. But it was like the same tiny size in my hand, like, and I recognize this part of me as like representing like not exactly my inner child, but the part of me that's very connected to my depression, that like sinks into this like um almost like victimhood, or like vulnerable, feeling alone, like whatever, like, you know, shit that I used to be so prevalent for me that I'm now kind of not on the surface anymore. It's shrunk. Used to be a big part of me. Now it's kind of cool, like how small it was in my hand. It was like getting kind of smaller. Um, and I kind of just nurtured that part of myself. I just like held it to my heart, and then like it reabsorbed into me. It was like I was just accepting it and not trying to force it to be anything else, but understanding I didn't have to act on that. I didn't have to think like that. I didn't have to be that way, but just allowing that part of me to say what it needed to say, and then it didn't need to be anymore. So that's cool. It probably will come back. I'm human, but it's just there. Um, and it was as this was happening, it was like I felt, and in some ways saw, but I didn't write this down, like it's like I felt like I was in the shoes of my holy daemon holding me. It was like it felt like I was reaching into like what, like the version of myself. It's like a memory would link back to that version, and it's like I'm back in time comforting myself through that. It was very interesting. It was like I went, yeah, back in time to comfort my past selves in the skin of my holy daemon. Very interesting shit. Anyway, um, at some point I changed back to myself, but I don't remember how that happened. It's kind of, this shit's all weird, right? It's like a waking dream is how I would describe it. Okay. Where was I? Then another object appeared. And this one also came down, but it was not humanoid shaped. It was like a very sharp shard of glass. And I remember like delicately holding it, and it seemed like no matter how I held it, my fingers would get cut. Um, they were getting cut, but they were healing pretty quickly. I wasn't bleeding everywhere anymore, you know. But it was like very sharp. Stay with me. I know this is like in a whole different. I'll explain, but like, and inside I was seeing like a different aspect of my toxicity, and I did the same thing, reabsorbed it into myself. I did that with a few other things. And then the light from above faded out. And then the star kind of faded a little bit. It was like dimmer. It didn't completely disappear. And then there was a doorway that opened up the void, and through it I could see what looked like earth and sky. So I step out, and I'm in this like desert, like a rocky kind of desert, like an Arizona type desert. And there's like this windmill in the distance, white. And there's this little figure, well, not little, but far away figure, little compared to the windmill, in black. I can't quite make out who or what it is. And above me is like, I look in the sky, and the sky is like no clouds. And I see the sun, and around the sun, like the rays are yellow. It was that, but in the middle, where it would normally be like a white circle, it was like a black circle, But other than that, it looked like Earth. And like, yeah, blue sky, like normal sand color, dirt, like normal colored cacti, you know, like everything else, like pretty much normal. There was a bit of wind and it was hot and dry. And I started to like move toward the figure in the windmill, and the figure like kind of disappeared like a mirage. And then the windmill's like spokes or whatever become like the 11 points of the star again, turning like counterclockwise, or it was turning clockwise and I actually like willed it to turn the other way. And as it did, the sky like darkened, and instead of a flat drawing, I could then see that the lines, like as it seemed to be rotating, it was actually like lines being drawn by these two stars, kind of like actual stars in the sky. I mean, astronomical stars, balls of gas and light and heat, crossing or like rotating, like orbiting each other almost. And like it's like drawing the star in the sky in like real time. And for some reason it's like I zoomed out from that, and I recognized as the twin star Algol, or the demon star. And I was like, oh yes, that corresponds to Thaumiel, of course. Which I guess makes sense. Satan and Moloch at war with each other. You have these two twin stars kind of, you know, in each other's business. Of course, my memory could be completely messed up, and Algol might not be a twin star at all, and I'm like mixing it up with some other star, but that's just what was going on in my brain as I was witnessing this. That could mean something else. So I zoomed out of that, and then I was back with Nama. You know, where we started, and she was just kind of like, where did you go? You know, where did you go? And I was like, I was in the desert. And she's like, who'd you meet? And I was like, well, at first I thought it was you, but I'm not sure, you know. And all she really said to that was like, you're free to explore, just be careful not to get lost. And I was like, okay. Like, you know, noted, cool. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting. She kind of brought me to this in-between sort of place, and she like did something with my chakras that was interesting. It's hard to describe. I didn't really write it down very well here. Mainly my third eye, my heart, and my sacral chakras. Yeah. And then this is kind of like as they were kind of pushing me out, because they're like, you've been spending too much time in this Qlipha, so but anyway, we were wrapping it up basically. Then I was in a memory. I found myself in a memory. And I'm watching the memory not through my own eyes, but like from a third party point of view. And sorry if I'm looking down, I'm reading this. So it was in my childhood home, and what I liked to do when I lived there was at night on a full moon, I would, because I wasn't really allowed to like explore 33 acres of land that I would have loved. Anyway, so I instead removed the screen on my window, and I would like crawl out onto the roof, and I would just enjoy the moon and the fireflies and the sound of the coyotes and the forest, like from the rooftop. So this was a memory of a full moon, and it happened to correspond. I happened to be doing this working on the full moon, so it was kind of like this parallel between now and the past, which was interesting. So I'm in this memory, and I'm watching myself like from the forest, and I can see like fireflies around me like from the forest, and I'm just kind of taking in the night and feeling the night. And then I kind of sink into the forest, and I walk towards what I know is the lake, which is called the Heron Pond, but it's really a small lake down that property. And I come across the water, and the moon is shining in the water. And I know this is such cliche imagery, but like I carefully, how did I put this? Like, yeah, I carefully step on top of the water, and I knew I had to like tread carefully or I could like sink through it. It was almost like maybe it was like frozen with a layer of melted water on top. Maybe it was that. But you know, it had the sensation of like just walking on water. It felt kind of cold, but I wasn't aware if it was like especially cold. And so I kind of come to the spot in the water where the moon's reflection is, and I see the sigil of this Qliphoth that I'm using in the system, like above me and then reflected in the water. And I could hear Nama's voice telling me that this is how I was to begin the dream work in this place. So yeah, that's where that ends. Very weird, I know. Not exactly what I expected, but I kind of look back on these symbols as I read over them again. I am piecing together, for me personally, like what it fits into, like, because if, you know, Nahemoth corresponds to Malkuth, that is Earth, you know, that is where we are. And yes, I'm looking at the Black Earth, which means I'm looking at the vengeful aspect of Mother Earth. I'm looking at the shadow of this world right now. And for me, a lot of my shadow definitely does live in my childhood home. It makes sense that the water nearby it would be this portal. And I think it makes sense that I had to address what I needed to address in order to move beyond the things that are kind of tying me to Malkuth, if that makes sense. So I can move through Nahemoth correctly. So I found that useful. I'm still learning more about it as I reflect on it, as I meditate on it, and it's interesting, but I'm also trying not to dwell because it is about time that I begin my work in Gamaliel. But I hope this was interesting to watch. I'm sorry that I was so fucking rambling in the beginning. But, you know, I'm a little protective over this information, even though I'm sharing it. I want to share it very desperately, but I also don't want people who wouldn't care about it to really hear it. So maybe the rambling was my shadow trying to protect it a little bit from people who don't care. But yeah, anyway, like I said, I'm not going to promise that I'm going to share necessarily about each qlipha, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to share something about that experience, even if I'm not sharing something as in-depth as this or as personal as this. I'm going to try to share something about it, some kind of reflection on it. And I'm kind of considering this form of documentation as part of that closing ritual, as part of that an extension on the personalized ritual, as this path working was, and as the ceremony that I do in the temple is. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was interesting to you. If you are on your own Qliphothic journey, share a little bit about this qlipha with me. Like, share what did you see in Nahemoth or Lilith, what came up for you? I imagine, keep it PG though, this is YouTube, but we can't get into like pornographic detail, but I just realized what I was asking for. So yeah, don't get into too graphic, but I mean more in the spiritual aspects. What lessons came up for you? Anyways, I'm gonna go now because tomorrow I have a big day. So thanks so much for supporting my channel. I'll have links updated, whatever, but I think for now I'm just going to pass out as I upload this video. So I may update the description with the relevant links later. But for right now, or in a pinned comment, but for right now, I'm really fucking tired and I just want to get my evening prayers out of the way and prepare myself for when I want to begin my work in Gamaliel. Anyway, have a good night and Ave Satanis.